Usually when we look at the historical evolution of human tools, there's a really clear kind of comforting boundary.
Right. The psychological safety net, basically.
Yeah, exactly. You build a machine and it just executes the mechanical labor. Like you build a calculator, it crunches the numbers you feed it.
Mm-hmm.
The tool executes the process, but the human is always the one generating the intent, right? The creative direction. It keeps us firmly in the driver's seat.
Right. Well, that boundary is how we rationalize that technology serves us rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when you look at the raw data coming out of the artificial intelligence sector this week, that safety net is dissolving in real time.
It really is.
We are no longer observing tools that just, process faster. We're dealing with systems that are starting to reason, synthesize, and create in ways that human engineers never explicitly programmed.
It's wild. Well, welcome to Macroeconomy AI. Today is Saturday, May 23, 2026.
Yes, it is.
And we are unpacking an incredibly dense data collection period spanning from May 16 to May 23, 2026.
A very busy week.
Seriously. In this deep dive, our AI Observatory, we're tracking a technological landscape that has just fundamentally shifted from brute computation to autonomous creation.
Yeah, autonomous being the key word there.
Exactly. We are going to explore a week of simultaneous, just mind-bending accelerations. I mean, we've got an AI autonomously solving an 80-year-old mathematical mystery.
Which is huge.
Massive. Plus leaked audio from a tech billionaire detailing some pretty extreme employee surveillance and the global geopolitical battleground of AI regulation fracturing right before our eyes.
We've got a lot to cover.
We do. Thank you so much to everyone tuning in. We highly encourage you to engage with the content in the comments, share your thoughts, and let us know how these shifts are impacting your own industry.
Absolutely. We love reading those.
Yeah. And before we jump into the deep end, a quick shout out to our sponsor channel, Macroeconomy AI, bringing a compilation of analyses and news on macroeconomics, technology, and artificial intelligence.
All right. So the best place to start understanding the sheer scale of this week's shift is with the fundamental capability of these models.
Right.
Because the ceiling has just completely moved.
It really has. Let's look at that mathematical breakthrough from OpenAI.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So for 80 years, mathematicians have been trying to solve Paul Erdős's discrete geometry conjecture. He postulated this way back in 1946.
Right. An old problem.
Very old. And at a basic level, it's a problem about the maximum number of times a specific distance can occur between a set of points on a flat plane.
Which sounds simple when you say it out loud.
It sounds so simple, but it is famously stubborn. It's this major open question in foundational mathematics.
Right, and the historical context here is critical, right? Because AI has been deployed in advanced math for years.
Sure.
But primarily as like a highly sophisticated calculator. Human mathematicians would formulate the hypothesis, design the parameters, and then just use the AI to brute force millions of calculations to verify their logic.
Like checking their work.
Exactly. The human provided the insight and the machine provided the sweat.
But the internal reasoning model at OpenAI didn't just check human homework this week. It produced a 125-page proof refuting the Erdős conjecture.
Entirely autonomously.
Entirely autonomously. And the method, how it achieved this is what we really need to highlight for you all.
Yeah, the method is the crazy part.
It didn't just run endless geometric permutations. It pulled a highly complex tool called infinite class field towers from a completely different domain.
Algebraic number theory.
Yes, algebraic number theory. And it mapped it onto Euclidean geometry. My read on this is that it recognized a structural invisible parallel between an abstract algebraic hierarchy and physical space that human mathematicians simply hadn't mapped yet. Is that a fair assessment?
That is precisely what happened. And I mean, it represents the essence of what we call genius,
right.
Cross-pollination.
Yeah.
Human innovation usually happens when an expert in one field stumbles across a concept from a completely unrelated discipline and realizes it perfectly unlocks a bottleneck in their own work.
Right.
The model demonstrated that exact leap of lateral thinking. And, this isn't a case of corporate marketing either.
No, it was verified.
Exactly. The proof was independently validated by Tim Gowers, who is a Fields medalist, and Princeton's Will Sawin. They explicitly quantified the mathematical improvement. The model generated novel, verifiable knowledge.
It's the equivalent of asking your calculator to balance your checkbook, and it hands you an original, structurally flawless piece of poetry instead.
That's a great analogy,
Yeah.
which honestly perfectly contextualizes the gravity of Jack Clark's presentation at Oxford this week.
Oh, man, yeah. The Cosmos lecture.
Right, so the Anthropic co-founder delivered this lecture and made a timeline-bound prediction that should make every industry leader pause.
Yeah.
Because these models are now demonstrating lateral original reasoning, he predicts an AI-human collaborative discovery worthy of a Nobel Prize within the next 12 months.
12 months is basically tomorrow in the timeline of global science.
It is imminent.
Yeah.
And he went further. He assigned a greater than 60% probability to an intelligence explosion occurring by the end of 2028.
Okay, wait. For those listening who might not know the exact term, an intelligence explosion mechanically is the theoretical threshold where an AI system becomes capable of entirely designing, coding, and training its own successor, right?
Yes, removing the human engineering bottleneck entirely.
Right, so the iterations would just compound exponentially.
Exactly. And in that context, Clark calmly noted a non-zero chance of AI posing an extinction-level risk to humanity.
Which is chilling to hear stated so calmly.
It is, but he framed it not as science fiction, but as a severe practical risk scenario that the global community has to integrate into its strategic planning. Because, I mean, we are dealing with Nobel-level cognition.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you possess a system capable of Nobel-level reasoning and self-improvement, you don't just keep it sequestered in a research lab.
No, of course not.
You deploy it to the enterprise. You productize it immediately. And this massive leap in underlying capability explains exactly why the corporate race to dominate this tech has gone into absolute hyperdrive this week.
Oh, yeah. The transition from pure research to mass commercialization was basically the defining theme of Google I/O 2026.
It really was.
The entire event was just this loud, very expensive declaration that the agentic era has officially arrived.
Okay, let's break down the architecture of this agentic era for you guys, because Google launched Gemini Omni and Gemini 3.5 Flash, claiming it's 4 times faster than previous flagship models.
Right, a huge speed bump.
But the real paradigm shift was the Anti-Gravity 2.0 platform. We are moving entirely away from the chatbot interface where you type a prompt and get an answer.
Goodbye to the text box.
Seriously. Anti-Gravity 2.0 is an orchestration layer. It manages autonomous agents that operate in the background. They announced Gemini Spark, which is a 247 personal agent.
And they paired this with a wild hardware pivot.
The audio glasses.
Yes, the audio smart glasses built with Warby Parker and Gentle Monster. There are no screens. You simply wear the glasses, and Gemini interacts natively with your digital and physical environment.
Just whispering updates and executing tasks directly into your ear.
Exactly. The strategic goal here is invisible ubiquity, and Microsoft is executing the exact same playbook.
Oh, with PowerPoint, right.
Right. They launched a global beta natively integrating ChatGPT directly into PowerPoint, but it doesn't just generate a paragraph of text anymore.
Right, it's way more integrated.
It accesses your secure corporate SharePoint, pulls your data, analyzes your Outlook emails, and autonomously structures and designs highly targeted multi-slide decks from a side panel.
Wow.
These companies are engaging in a scorched earth battle for corporate dominance by positioning themselves as the invisible automated workforce for the global economy.
Okay, but I have to pause and look at the philosophical friction of this agentic lifestyle.
Go through it.
If my audio glasses are constantly listening to my environment, automatically categorizing my emails, negotiating my calendar, and building my strategic presentations at work, where does a human boundary actually begin and end?
It gets very blurry.
Extremely blurry. It feels like we are outsourcing the actual cognitive load of our daily lives and fundamentally eroding our own agency.
Well, the market, however, is currently valuing that outsourced agency in the trillions.
Fair point.
If we look at the financial stakes this week, and to be completely clear to you listening, we are analyzing strategic market dynamics here, not providing investment advice of any kind.
Right. Strictly analytical.
Exactly. The numbers are staggering. Anthropic captured the #1 spot on CNBC's Disruptor 50 list. They are reporting $44 billion in annual recurring revenue, and they're actively negotiating a $900 billion valuation.
That is approaching the GDP of a medium-sized nation.
It is. And OpenAI is pacing right alongside them, clearing a major legal roadblock for their own estimated $850 billion IPO.
Right, the Elon Musk lawsuit.
Yep. A federal jury in Oakland unanimously dismissed all of Elon Musk's claims against OpenAI and Sam Altman in under 2 hours.
Under 2 hours.
Yeah, simply because the judge ruled the statute of limitations had expired. So the runway is entirely clear for them to capitalize.
Wow. But Supporting near trillion-dollar valuations and powering millions of autonomous, always-on agents requires massive physical
A
infrastructure.
tremendous
You
amount.
cannot run an intelligence explosion on thin air. It demands an unfathomable amount of computing energy, and it necessitates a radical, painful restructuring of human labor.
Yeah, the human cost of this acceleration escalated significantly this week.
It really did. We got that piece of internal audio on April 30th that leaked featuring Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. He was defending a program called the Model Capability Initiative. So, Meta is tracking the granular keystrokes, mouse clicks, and screen movements of their own employees to generate training data for their AI models.
Which is intense surveillance.
It is. And Zuckerberg's argument on the tape was that the models learn by seeing smart people use computers.
The context of that audio leak is what makes it so volatile, though.
The layoffs.
Exactly. The recording surfaced the exact same week Meta initiated 8,000 corporate layoffs. They are actively extracting the digital workflows of their workforce to train the systems that make that exact workforce redundant.
Yeah.
And this is not an isolated incident. Standard Chartered Bank announced the elimination of 8,000 back-office roles by 2030, specifically citing AI integration.
Yeah, and the phrasing used by Standard Chartered CEO Bill Winters is what truly stands out to me. He explicitly stated they are replacing lower-value human capital with financial and investment capital.
Lower value human capital.
I mean, describing human beings, people handling reconciliation, compliance, administration as lower-value human capital is igniting intense real-world friction.
Understandably so.
We are seeing formal petitions circulating at Meta and aggressive unionization efforts gaining traction in the UK. Workers are realizing that if they quietly become training data, they're basically engineering their own exit interviews.
It is a profound societal disruption.
Yeah.
But interestingly, while the human labor bottleneck is generating deep social friction, the physical hardware bottleneck is forcing radical scientific innovation.
Oh, right. The GPUs.
Yeah, the central nervous system of this entire industry relies on GPUs, and those chips are currently hitting their absolute thermal limits.
They just get too hot.
Exactly. They generate too much heat to sustain the power density required for the next generation of models.
Which brings us to the breakthrough out of the University of Pennsylvania, published in Physical Review Letters.
Yeah.
Researchers have created hybrid light matter particles called exciton polaritons.
Yes.
Because traditional computing forces electrons down silicon pathways. Think of it like a congested highway of cars. They bump into each other, cause friction, and generate massive amounts of heat. If they're combining light and matter, my hypothesis is that they're trying to use the properties of light to completely eliminate that friction while using matter to actually execute the computational logic. Am I on the right track?
You have isolated the exact mechanism by coupling a photon, which is light, with an exciton late.
Wait, what's an exciter again?
It's a bound state of an electron and an electron hole.
Okay, I got it.
So by coupling them, they create a quasi-particle. And this allows for optical switching of signals. Instead of physical electrons generating heat through resistance, these polaritons use orders of magnitude less energy, and they operate at the speed of light.
It bypasses the electronic bottlenecks entirely.
Exactly. The entity that successfully commercializes this optical computing infrastructure will permanently alter the physical limits of AI capability.
But as we rapidly rebuild the global computing infrastructure to support this automated economy, the architecture itself becomes incredibly vulnerable.
Highly vulnerable.
When you centralize the cognitive labor of thousands of companies into a few foundational code bases, attacking those systems becomes the most lucrative endeavor on Earth for bad actors.
And we saw the stark reality of that vulnerability with the massive GitHub supply chain attack this week.
The Team PCP hack.
Yes. Microsoft GitHub confirmed that a sophisticated hacking group known as Team PCP successfully exfiltrated 3,800 internal repositories.
The timeline is what is truly alarming here to me. They didn't brute force a firewall over months.
No, they do.
They poisoned a popular VS Code extension called the Next Console. An employee installed the Trojanized update, and the malicious payload was only active on the marketplace for 18 minutes.
18 minutes.
In that 18-minute window, before security operations could even trigger an alert, the hacker stole passwords, Claude code configurations, AWS keys, essentially the master keys to the deployment pipeline.
Yeah, and if the foundational code repositories are compromised at the supply chain level, the integrity of the resulting AI models cannot be guaranteed.
At all.
The industry is acutely aware of this structural trust deficit. It's driving this sudden, coordinated rush toward provenance and watermarking.
Right, which we saw when OpenAI and Google jointly announced the adoption of the Synthude watermark for images this week. It embeds an invisible cryptographic signal directly into the pixels of AI-generated content.
Mhm.
But frankly, if a hacking group can effortlessly breach internal systems like GitHub and steal 3,800 repositories in 18 minutes, a public watermark feels like a superficial solution.
A Band-Aid.
If the underlying supply chain and development pipelines are compromised, the watermarking tools themselves could easily be compromised or bypassed by bad actors.
Well, a watermark only verifies that a specific rendering tool was utilized, right?
Right.
It does absolutely nothing to resolve the broader crisis of structural truth.
Exactly.
And that crisis extends far beyond independent hacking syndicates. It reaches the highest levels of global geopolitics.
This was empirically proven by that chilling study published in Nature this week.
Yes, the state media study.
Right, because we constantly hear that LLMs learn from ingesting the internet. But this study demonstrated precisely how state media control directly and permanently biases these models.
The methodology of the study is critical here. Researchers analyzed large language models trained natively in the languages of authoritarian regimes, so nations with systematically low press freedom.
Right.
Because the training data available in those languages is heavily filtered, censored, and engineered by the state, the resulting AI models natively absorb and reproduce those government narratives.
Wow.
When queried in those specific languages, the AI evaluates its own authoritarian government significantly more favorably than models queried in languages originating from nations with high press freedom and open internet access.
The geopolitical bias is literally baked into the neural weights of the model.
Yes.
The AI just functions as an automated ambassador for whoever controlled its training data. This reality turns the question of how global governments regulate these systems into the single most important policy debate of our time.
Undoubtedly.
And we are seeing completely divergent, deeply fractured approaches worldwide.
Let's examine the contrasting frameworks. In Brazil, the AI legal framework PL 2338/23 is advancing into a decisive legislative phase in their Chamber of Deputies.
Okay.
They are adopting a highly structured, risk-based approach. The legislation categorizes AI systems by their potential societal impact, establishing strict legal principles for transparency, algorithmic governance, and civil liability.
So they are attempting to build a flexible regulatory model, but one bound by absolute legal guardrails.
Right. Now contrast that methodical process with the events in the United States this week.
Yes, and I want to pause here just to be totally clear to you listening. We are impartially reporting the specific findings published by Axios here. We are not taking any political side or endorsing any viewpoint.
Exactly. We are just neutrally reporting the text of the Axios report and the Brazil framework.
Right. So Axios detailed that Donald Trump abruptly canceled a signing ceremony for a highly anticipated executive order on AI. The order, drafted by national security officials, would have mandated a 90-day National Security Agency review for all frontier AI models.
Right.
However, the night prior to the signing, tech CEOs, specifically Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and David Sachs, called the president directly to lobby against the mandate.
And according to the Axios reporting, the corporate leaders argue the NSA review would severely slow down AI development.
Right.
The report explicitly noted that Trump cited a hindrance to U.S. technological leadership and a general distaste for regulation as his primary reasons for canceling the order.
It's just such a stark global contrast. You have one nation meticulously engineering a risk-based legal framework through its legislature, and another discarding drafted national security protocols following direct phone calls from the executives of the corporations poised to be regulated.
It aggressively highlights the extreme centralization of power surrounding this technology.
Yeah, it really does.
The direction of the agentic era isn't just being debated in the halls of government. It's being decided through private phone calls by a handful of individuals who control both the capital and the code.
Right. Consider this as we look ahead, If these systems are already autonomously generating 125-page mathematical proofs, utilizing abstract logic structures that human experts barely comprehend, what happens when they begin writing our global software infrastructure or drafting our corporate strategies using that same impenetrable logic? Do we even need to remain in the loop, or are we actively funding and engineering the architecture of our own obsolescence?
It completely shifts the definition of what it means to manage the future.
It really does. Well, before we wrap up, we have our required disclaimer to share with you all. Please remember, this content is exclusively informational and educational, compiling data, projections, and analyses from public market sources.
Why?
This material expresses no ideological bias and does not constitute investment recommendation or financial, legal, or tax advice of any kind. Economic and tech projections are subject to frequent revisions. Past performance does not guarantee future returns. The goal is to introduce concepts and stimulate debate. Always consult qualified professionals before making strategic or financial decisions.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us for this deep dive. The pace of this technological shift requires constant vigilance, and we will be right here to help analyze the data as it evolves.
That was today's Macroeconomy AI. We'll leave it here. You all stay well and keep an eye out for our new broadcasts. Subscribe to our channel, access the links, and follow Macroeconomy AI on social media.
Bye.